to right-size our costs, to fit our revenues, and to fit our enrollment. And these reviews, of course, will come to you in the spring. You decided to cease planning for transition from 3 to 1 institutional accreditations, and also taking steps included in our workshop yesterday, and the ongoing work that'll be led by you and the governance committee to clarify roles and responsibilities between the board and the universities. All good things. And now, of course, amidst all of this anxiety and Sturm und Drang at the university, we have to operate. So you recently adopted an annual operating budget for the current fiscal year, allocating reductions to each of the 3 universities to meet the state's cut, and actually cutting a little bit deeper in order to fund strategic priorities of economic development, workforce development, research, educational attainment, and cost effectiveness. You also funded the first compensation increases for faculty and staff after several years of going without. These were to address both legally required equity adjustments and, in addition, market salary gaps to ensure that we're able to recruit and retain the best faculty and staff we can. And I'd like to thank Kelly Height-McGee, our former Chief Human Resources Officer, for leadership in taking on that tough responsibility, but getting it done. These are never perfect processes or studies, but I think she did a great job, and we are now implementation mode and then working out details. I'd also like to announce for the board that Kelly's replacement is on board. Steve Patton, I think many of you have met, joins us from Alaska Communications, where he led process improvement, served on labor contract negotiation teams, and oversaw field operations of that company statewide. And prior to ACS, Steve served a career in the military, which included roles at the United States Military Academy and here in Alaska, overseeing ROTC programs at UAA and UAF. Steve's office, by the way, will be in Anchorage. And he will be overseeing our consolidated HR organization, which has staff physically located in Juneau, in Anchorage, and here in Fairbanks. So welcome, Steve. On the budget, looking forward, we're asking for your approval of the budget for FY 2021. We previewed that budget with you at the September meeting. Again, we're asking for your approval of that request here today. That request then goes on to the governor and on to the legislature for its consideration. In the meantime, of course, we're going to have to continue reducing. So we'll make additional program reductions and potential consolidations pursuant to the expedited program review process that each of our universities is conducting. We're continuing administrative consolidation, though now with the compact agreement, we've got more time for evaluation and inclusion and careful implementation. We're going to continue monetizing physical assets, selling land, selling facilities. We're going to keep investing in an assessment of our readiness for implementation of more modern systems, systems that interact between the university and our students. We're behind in needed investment in our IT infrastructure and in leaner processes. We're stepping up our philanthropy from alumni and foundations and others seeking to realize their dreams through scholarships and other support of the university. We're going to continue our work to bring student to instructional faculty ratios into closer alignment with our peers. We're hopefully, and we've certainly heard some testimony about it today, important that we consider that. And we'll raise the issue later today, and that is tuition. We're proposing to increase tuition for the coming year. And instead of 2 years, which is normally what we do, reviewing options for the second year and out years, because we want to study with governance leaders, especially our students, how we can increase enrollment while decreasing our tuitions, especially for CTE programs. I believe it was Bernard who cited our high tuition rates for CTE program. And of course, we have a discount for some of those now, and we'd like to really look hard at that this year to see if that discount can be deepened and perhaps broadened to include other community and technical education programs. And then we'd also like to look at the possibility of differentiating university tuition across our campuses. We're continuing to work on expansion of online programs, including the virtual middle college I mentioned earlier, which could enable college-ready high school students across the state to take classes here at the university and receive dual credit for them. We really want to sharpen our focus too on the more than 100,000 Alaskans. We rank #1 in the country in the percentage of our population with some college and no degree. How can we help them finish what they've started? None of those people started college with the intention of not finishing. How can we help them finish? We want to increase our collaboration with K-12 and employers to make sure our students can see the way from their education into the future of work. In closing, when we reached the agreement with the governor on August 13th, I got a note from a longtime friend, the president of the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. And the note was very short. It basically said, "Congratulations, you have just moved from the impossible to the very difficult." So in addition to working through all the technical challenges that we face, budget, for example, difficult challenges, but I think they're manageable, we face, as we discussed yesterday and as we listened this morning, we face a much more difficult adaptive challenge, I think, for the university. And because of our huge role, important role in our state, it's a challenge for Alaska. And that adaptive challenge is, how do we preserve and honor what is most core to our mission and our purpose for our students and the communities we serve, while shedding what we must in order to adapt and survive and even thrive in a fast-changing economic and demographic and technological world. You know, scholars of leadership have taught us that the role of leaders is clear and relatively simple in a stable environment: provide resources, ensure security, and manage internal conflict. That role becomes much more difficult when the context changes suddenly and radically, as happened to us, such that the skills and capabilities and perspectives and habits of leaders that were very successful in that stable environment must change in this new context. So adapting as leaders becomes the difficult challenge, and I think we took a good positive step yesterday in that direction. And that we've got to do that in addition to improving our external conditions, increasing enrollment, increasing support from donors, increasing public support for the university, and of course, ultimately, hopefully, budgets. But we'll do all that by better understanding and respecting roles and responsibilities. And I really am looking forward to supporting and working with our governance representatives and the governance committee of the board to pursue the policy audit and bringing the results of that back to the full board. I want to make sure too that we ensure that our students, all of our students, and I really respect the comments made here today, that making sure what's best for them is at the top of the list of our priorities. And, you know, I do want to say, too, that I enjoy meeting with the students. I wish, frankly, that the specific concerns they raised here today, they raised with me last month when we met and earlier this week when we met, because I love to have that discussion. I love to learn from our students and make sure that, that they are learning and that I am learning with them. And I want to commit to working with them and with the chancellors, with the communities we serve under the board's direction together, with all the wisdom and the courage and the grace that each one of us can muster. And I believe if we pull together that way, we will thrive as a university and as a state. And as I've said many times, and it's a simple truth, but I think it's important to keep reminding us of it, is we must have a great university to be a great state. Mr. Chair, those are my remarks this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Are there questions or comments from the board? None. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the chancellor's reports. Start with Chancellor White.
Well, thanks. I will start out, and I was just looking back because I think most of the student athletes just had to leave. They were here for the athletics report, and they were here to kind of show you that they support athletics. And I know that we do have a few. We've got Laura Weber, and I see Zoe Keene is here from the women's volleyball team that won last night and will be playing again on Saturday. And I know that Coach Brian Scott and Megan Olson are here. They are missing practice, which is going on at the moment. But we'll be talking later about athletics. I just want them to hear that, you know, what we'll be presenting, Kathy and I, is that the committee that was chaired by Matt Cooper and the athletics directors, you know, developed options for athletics and found overwhelming support for athletics to continue. We need to make those decisions now, and so we're making those decisions. And that the athletics, and this is with the president's support, will continue regardless of structure in these programs. And so we're happy about that. And I again will thank Bart Laban, who came and testified, also recognizing that Becca Wieland is in the audience. She is our swim coach. Our basketball team was here earlier, but they had to catch a plane to go to UAA to play some basketball. So I'm looking forward to that report, but we'll talk more about that. Yeah, I just want to say a few positive things. There's a lot of positive work going on at the university. Enrollment, as President Johnson mentioned, at the Fairbanks campus, at the Trothieta campus, as we call it, is up 1.5%. CTC had an increase this year. Overall, UAF is a slight decrease, but incoming graduate students increased by 17%. Incoming transfer students increased 38%. Increased by 38%. And the Fairbanks campus has the same number of incoming students as we did last year. And so that's a good sign. And as I've mentioned a number of times, it seems to me like that's 20% above where it could have been given all of the news that we had. That is all a result of this kind of increase in stability and enrollment of strategic enrollment planning, which we started several years ago under Vice Chancellor Champagne and his team, Mary Creta, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management. They started this 2 years ago, and we've been working through the process. And to some of the comments earlier in testimony, it is getting students from out of state. We are a destination university. UAF is a world-class university, and people come from all over to attend. And many of our athletes, we have a number of Alaska athletes, but many are coming from out of state and out of country to play here at UAF. As we talk about what UAF means to this community, and livability.com ranked Fairbanks one of the fourth top college town in America. And it was ranked the fourth top college town in America because what this university means to the community and what the community means to the university. And it's a partnership between UAF and Fairbanks that makes this a destination university and a destination community. So that's something that we are celebrating. And I'll just read from the livability.com. It says, people have to stick together in Alaska, and that same sense of community and teamwork carries through to students at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, home of the Nanooks. 50th anniversary this year, we celebrated Rural Student Services. This is a program that provides a cultural hub for students from rural communities to come and have a sense of belonging here at UAF. Rural Student Services has contributed, it works with about 500 students per year, increases retention rates among rural and Alaska Native students. And in the past 30 years, Rural Student Services, just the last 30, it's been in place for 50, Rural Student Services played a part in the graduation of more than 4,400 Alaska Native students from UAF. Thanks, and I'll just mention, when we talk about research, I'll be talking about our One Health initiative, but for now, I'll just mention the one, well, there's so many bright spots in the One Health Research Initiative, but I mentioned last time that our three leaders, Stacy Rasmus, who's the director of our Center for Alaska Native Health Research, Yvonne Peter, who's our Vice Chancellor for Native and Rural Education, Rural Community and Native Education, and Arlie Reynolds, who's a director of One Health, submitted that MacArthur 100 and Change grant, which is a $100 million proposal. And last time I mentioned it got through the first round of reviews. It is now through the second round of reviews. And so it's a big deal. It would fund the whole Trothieta Indigenous Studies Complex itself. It's a big deal. And just to get to that second round, it's now a very intensive review process of the remaining candidates for that $100 million proposal. So lots more to come on research and One Health research. But yeah, just want to again thank the athletes and the supporters of UAF athletics for being here, and thank you to your support of UAF and that program in particular. Thank you.
All right, in the interest of time, I'll just highlight a few things, and I think it's really important that we turn the page on the negative and we go forward toward the positive. It is First Generation College Student Day, and I myself am a first generation college student, want to take a moment to acknowledge the others in the room who also are, and how much we care about our students and how much we want to support them in their own journeys. Probably the number one piece of good news to report, and I think you've heard this, is the funding we received from Primera Foundation, $1.77 million to support expansion of our nursing education programs throughout the state of Alaska. So some of this will be in Anchorage, but the majority of it will not be in Anchorage. It will be spread across Bethel, Dillingham, and Ketchikan. And those are partnerships and relationships with these two wonderful colleagues on either side of me. So that's great news. Today, November 8th, we are hosting the Armed Forces Classic basketball tournament at the UAA Alaska Airlines Center. This is a tournament that's been sponsored by the military. We're in the 9th year, and typically it's held on a military base. And this year the host was JBER, but they decided to partner with us and to use our great facility. And it's very good exposure for UAA and University of Alaska. There have been advertisements about this basketball tournament, and we get a 30-second spot to feature UAA on ESPN. So I think we're going to be filling the Alaska Airlines Center. The first game is at 5:30 today, and that is University of Washington against Baylor University. It's a doubleheader. The second game is UAA men's basketball and the Coast Guard Academy. So some of you, I think, are going to try to swing by and see that. I think Regent Hughes in particular. So that'd be good. Let's see. I'd love to highlight a new project that we have at UAA that received some positive press coverage, and it's a new app and a whole new wayfinding system to support visually impaired students finding their way around campus. So it's a use of technology, and they have sensors that help them find their way. I'd like to talk a little bit about some positive press focused on some of our faculty work in particular. So first, we had a number of researchers who were really focusing locally on the impact of studded tires on the pavement in Alaska. So you probably heard that the Anchorage Assembly was going to consider shortening the interval in which we can use studded tires. And that research came from UAA faculty, ICER's Tobias Schworer, and UAA Civil Engineering Department's Osama Abaza did that work. In addition, other coverage for our faculty research. In Bloomberg Environment, Jennifer Schmidt's work on reducing wildfire risks and damages the smart new way. It's looking at a number of different ways. For example, the best way to lower risk is to provide an equal mix of carrots, incentives, and sticks, tax-based risks or legal requirements in terms of getting people to do what they need to do to reduce wildfire risks. Another article in Scientific America by Musin Gatabi, and you probably heard this, but this one went national. Can universal basic income reduce childhood obesity? And this is his work to look at the effect of the Alaska Permanent Fund dividend on the relationship between that and childhood obesity. And finally, in the National History News Network, Forrest Neighbors' work on lessons from our Republican ancestors on free speech. So he had an essay that was posted on that national outlet. In terms of our students, now you've heard a lot from our students today, but just one to feature who won a recent award. One of our students, Michael Martinez, placed first in the American Indian Science and Engineering Society's National Conference, and he received a first place prize in the graduate division and for his research and oral presentation. So we want to give our congratulations to him. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about something that popped up recently. We have a campaign going on at UAA whereby individuals can contribute or donate a jar of peanut butter and a jar of jam or jelly to be forgiven of a parking citation. So it's called PB&J Food for Fines. And this got picked up by a lot of national outlets as well. So this idea that if you have parking fines at UAA for a period of time, you can donate food and it goes into our food cache, our student food cache for students who are suffering from food insecurity. And this story was picked up in the Washington Post. It was picked up by NPR. It was picked up by Huffington Post in their Weird News blog. And I would just want to say that, yeah, they may think that it's weird news, but we think that it's great news. So again, a few little snippets of positive news from UAA. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Councilor Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will try to be brief. I want to start out by bringing you up to date on the recent visit to our Alaska College of Education by accreditors from CAPE, the Council for Accreditation of Education Providers. You all know very well how important successful accreditation is to our university's mission as a lead in offering quality teacher education and ed leadership programs. So we had 6 reviewers on the Juneau campus last week who had already done a careful review of our self-study prepared by our education faculty and staff. And I'm very pleased to report that it was a very successful visit. While the formal approval from CAPE will not come until the commission meets in April and then notification in May, the chair of the review team stated that we had a very positive review and that the committee would be recommending full accreditation to CAPE for the Alaska College of Education. And with that, no stipulations or substantive issues were found with our programs under the 5 standards. There was only one so-called AFI, or Area for Improvement, in our initial certification program. There were 3 unsurprising AFIs for our advanced programs. So we were very pleased by that. Of course, we don't have formal notification of that until CAPE as a commission actually meets and prepares a formal letter of notification, but a very, very positive outcome from that site visit. And I do want to give credit to our education faculty and staff under the leadership of Executive Dean Steve Atwater and the guidance of Associate Dean Scott Christian and Heather Batchelder, who is our Faculty Senate President. Is Heather here in the room with us? Here she is. Heather is a part of that faculty and did a terrific job. Thank you. Along with her colleagues in preparing for that very successful outcome. So we're pleased about that, and I'm happy to report to all of you about it. A second item is the Senator Ted Stevens Legislative Internship Program. The director for that program, faculty member Glenn Wright, notifies me that he expects to have as many as 18 student interns in the Capitol in Juneau for the upcoming legislative session, coming from UAF, coming from UAA, and coming from UAS. And so that looks promising for the spring legislative session. We were successful in securing the matching grant required for Ted Stevens Foundation funding. So we have that in place, and we will be able to provide those students with a strong stipend to help them make that transition to Juneau. And we're very grateful to the Ted Stevens Foundation for their support in endorsing and investing in that program for Alaska's future. Plans are underway just now for an orientation this fall and an in-place orientation in Juneau in the spring for those new interns. On our Sitka campus, the Sitka campus faculty and staff were involved with the Sitka Sound Science Center with Whale Fest. It was held between October 31st and November 3rd. It's a major event in the community, which blends local knowledge and scientific inquiry. Professor Jan Straley, who was very much involved with that, said that there were some 30 students from both UAS and UAF who participated. Many of them took a special Biology 375 special topics course that was associated with it and participated listening to the various scientists speaking about the health of our oceans. There were also some 44 high school students participating from throughout Southeast Alaska, including Mount Edgecombe High School, Juneau, Metlakatla, Craig, Wrangell, Gustavus, and Yakutat. So it was a very, very successful event. Thinking about the Regent's goals for workforce development, we worked with our UAA partners just recently in completing a healthcare workforce assessment for Southeast Alaska. We were working with Dean Jeff Jesse on this, and along with that, the Southeast Conference, which represents the political leadership of communities across the state. And the goal was to map out healthcare workforce needs in our region for the next 5 to 10 years. And when this idea was first put out on the table, I was really struck by how quickly employers in the region stepped right up and said they would help fund this. So in addition to some funding both from UAA and UAS, Bartlett Regional Hospital, Search, and Peace Health and Ketchikan all stepped up to help pay for that survey, which was presented to the annual meeting of the Southeast Conference in September in Sitka. And so it creates a roadmap now for us to continue working on both nursing programs and allied health programs to serve Southeast Alaska. And I was very pleased to hear from Chuck Bill, who's the CEO of Bartlett Regional Hospital, that they hired all of our recent nursing graduates to go to work at Bartlett. So the need absolutely is there, and that was reaffirmed by the survey itself, which showed that nurses continues to be the top priority for employers in Southeast Alaska. And I was also very pleased to be at the event that Kathy Sandine just mentioned, celebrating the investment by Primera Blue Cross in healthcare programs in Alaska, the $1.7 million coming to UAA, and to know that some of that will be coming to our Ketchikan campus. So we're very grateful for the investment by Primera Blue Cross and also the partnership with UAA in expanding our health programs. November is Native American Heritage Month, and at UAS we'll be hosting a number of different events in that regard, including at our upcoming student-led Power and Privilege Symposium, which is taking place next Tuesday. Heather Kendall Miller will be speaking about fighting for Alaska Native rights as an attorney over 25 years with the Native American Rights Fund. And then tomorrow evening, tonight, our UAS Evening at Egan speaker will be author and attorney Walter Echohawk, who is Pawnee, and he's going to be speaking about his new book entitled The Sea of Grass. It's a book that tells the story of 10 generations of the author's Pawnee family in the Great Plains. So those are just two of a number of different activities associated with Native American Heritage Month. And then the final note I'll share, it's a personal note. I wanted you all to know that I have voiced my intention to President Johnson to retire next June in 2020. Not an easy decision for me, I must say. As others said in public testimony, I love this institution. I'm a graduate of the University of Alaska. It's been 35 years as a faculty member, community campus director, provost, and chancellor. And I'm very proud of the accomplishments, first being involved here at UAF in those various capacities, and then most recently at UAS, 5 years as provost, and then it will be 5 years as chancellor. And that includes the successful reaccreditation by the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities last spring. And then, as I just mentioned, a very positive report from the Cape site visit for the Alaska College of Education. And I say this too with a sense of great pleasure, knowing that we have a very strong leadership team, 3 of whom are front and center on our screen here in they're down in Juneau. Lori Klein, our Vice Chancellor for Student and Enrollment Services, Michael Siri, our Vice Chancellor for Administration, Ronaldo Cadiente Brown, our Associate Vice Chancellor for Alaska Native Programs, and here in the room, our Provost, Dr. Karen Carey. So as I contemplate this, I am confident that we have solid leadership in place at UAS. Of course, I bring this up now. I'm still going to be here at future meetings over the next 7 months, but we need to get started with a screening process. There will be a very broadly representative search committee formed with faculty, staff, and student representation from all 3 of our campuses and our community partners. And I believe the president asked that we use a search firm to help with that process. So we expect to get started on that very, very soon. So I wanted to just share that news with all of you. I'm very grateful and humbled by the opportunity to be of service to the University of Alaska. Thank you.
Chancellor Caulfield, I'm sure that I speak for the entire board, and we'll have more opportunity to do that, I'm sure, but we appreciate your long service to the university and your recent great service as chancellor at UAS. And, honor your decision, but know that it'll be hard to replace you. We really appreciate your longstanding and caring service to the many parts of the university, but particularly most recently as chancellor. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
And I want to also say...
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Mr.
yes.
Chair.
Regent O'Neill, go ahead.
Yes, I would just like to say thank you to Chancellor Caulfield, and I'd also like to say that your leadership over the last 7 months has been felt, and it's been a pleasure working with you, and I hope that we can continue to engage you in some sort of partnership moving forward.
Thank you, Regent O'Neill. I appreciate that very much. I will be here for the next 7 months, so I'm not going away yet.
Yeah, all right, for sure. Are there any other comments at this point? Regent Parker?
I will get it together. So, as the regents know, chancellors, our folks at KPC, we recently lost on Monday a very valued member of the University of Alaska, a professor who has spent the last 45 years teaching, mentoring students, community. Our buddy Alan Boris was a very honorable man, and as Teresa mentioned earlier, gratitude and grace was something that was Alan Boris. He was gratitude and grace. For those who don't know, Alan was a professor of anthropology at the Kena Peninsula College. He started when Mr. Brockle asked him in 1973 to come and start teaching adult basic ed. And he did. He went on to then get a master's degree, doctorate degree in anthropology and has spent his entire career looking at the culture, the history, the archaeology of the people of Cook Inlet, as well as other regions around the state. Worked very closely with the Dena'ina culture, and particularly many years with Peter Kalafonsky, a very respected gentleman, elder, who has since also passed on, to put together the history of the Dena'ina and the Kenaitze people. He was in the early 2000s, he was adopted as a member of the Kenaitze Indian tribe, which is, as Gloria and Sherry and Andy would say, quite an honor. He's the longest serving professor ever at KPC, as I said, having taught for more than 45 years. He is also the 2009 recipient of the Edith Bullock Prize for Excellence from the University of Alaska Foundation. So please take a moment to honor Alan.
Let's take a moment of silence. Thank you very much. And Regent Parker, thank you for reminding us of his passing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I know we are short on time, but Alan was at school at the same time we were. And one of the things that, and Regent Parker said, the way in which he acted was so full of grace. And one of the things that I'll always remember is every time I had the occasion to visit the campus, or he had the occasion to come up, he would remember all the different things that happened, and we went through, and of course his memory was so much better than mine, but he was so full of genuine caring about all of us. And that, I think if we remember one thing, is that caring for humanity that he had. And when we gave him the Edith Bullock Award, that was one of the major attributes of Alan that affected all of us. And I know Kena in the Soldotna area is so fortunate to have had him in their midst.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, as we transition away from the chancellor's reports, I want to appreciate the effort to highlight some of the really positive things that are going on. I think that's news that we need. And I also want to acknowledge Chancellor White's presentation. I was able to attend his presentation at the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce meeting, at which time he did a similar, he had a little longer, but he did a very great job of highlighting all the great energy that's going on at UAF, but at the whole system as well, across all three campuses and our remote campuses as well. So that's an effort that we all need to continue to make. I think it will pay dividends in many ways, but in terms of reestablishing and people Purdue.
In the interest of time, I won't reflect on all three of your reports, but they were very good. I just wanted to say, Chancellor Caulfield, how amazing your service has been and will be. I know we're going to expect a lot from you in the next 7 months at the university, and I know I first met you many decades ago, and you were. I was in an international forum, and you were speaking Greenlandic, and I thought, wow, this is an amazing person. So looking forward to working with you for the next several months, and really value what you've done so far.
Regent Garrett.
Thank you, Chair Davies. I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that we have two of our interns in the room today that are headed down to Juneau. And I'm really proud of you guys, Teresa Robel and Aiden Ernest. Are there any more? Don't want to miss anyone. Yeah, right on. Have so much fun.
Okay, with that, then let's move on to the governance reports. Who wants to start? Students for.
Hello, my name is Audrey Kirby. I'm the newly elected chair of the Coalition of Student Leaders. I want to quickly thank Teresa for her excellent work as acting chair. I hope to be able to do the role justice as she did. So thank you, Teresa. So yesterday, the Coalition of Student Leaders passed two resolutions, unanimously passed two resolutions. Their first resolution was to recommend that the Board of Regents postpone any increase in student tuition until fiscal year 2022. Most of the reasonings were stated in the testimonies by students earlier. I just want to point out a few more. Alaska is currently ranked last in low-income college participation, and is ranked 49 in this country, 49th in the country in college participation. And over the summer, there was threat that students weren't going to get funding for their APS scholarship. So I think this puts greater importance on the low tuition rate. So at this time, we the students feel that the tuition increase will do more harm than good. And so the second resolution we passed was to fully endorse the Faculty Alliance Resolution 2020-08 to propose Regents policies to be updated. So we feel that the duties of the Chancellor vary widely between each university, and we feel that the current policies make it difficult for the chancellors to understand their roles and to fulfill their duties. So we fully endorse the Faculty Alliance resolution, and we hope you consider our opinions when in the process when re-examining these policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as you heard yesterday, we passed a motion of the board to do that, and in that process explicitly called out consulting with the students as well as staff, faculty, et cetera. So we thank you for that, and we do intend to move forward with that examination. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Davies, President Johnson, and members of the board. First, on behalf of all of UA staff, I'd like to thank you for our time yesterday. I've been reflecting on why I chose to stick with UAF through these challenging times. What I found is that as long as I'm surrounded by optimistic and trust-building colleagues, I'll stick through whatever challenges life throws my way. This is what I saw yesterday and just reinforces why myself and many others continue to be committed to the University of Alaska. I'm hoping that this reinforces and in some cases sets a tone for the organization that will model open and honest conversation and will result in positive change. With this optimism, staff governance is excited to work together to ensure that the administrative integrations are successful and fulfill its promises. These integrations are very complex and require a great deal of time and resources to get right. We are also excited about the compensation survey adjustments moving forward. For many, this is addressing a much needed compensation adjustment. Unfortunately, due to our already extremely tight budget, we are keeping a close eye on unintended consequences of these adjustments, such as the need to lay off staff to pay for the compensation adjustments. I have not heard of this actually happening yet, but this is a real concern of staff. And it will continue being actively addressed by leadership, this concern, due to the 3-year nature of these, both increases in salary as well as the increases in cuts year over year. During yesterday's session, I'm also interested to learn what the Board of Regents, President and Chancellors sees as a responsibility for staff governance. While we have an idea of what these are, we would love to check in to ensure that we are meeting these responsibilities. Other thoughts have come to mind are looking at our policies from a human perspective. It appears that in a crisis, the board and leadership tend to pull up authority. While this makes sense in some ways, it does not make the people who, it does not feel empowering to the people who have had their authority withdrawn. It also does, as an organization as a whole, does not make people empowered to innovate. Communication has come up quite a few times in the last couple of weeks. While communication is always a challenge and never absolute, it is worth noting that much of our decision-making process has moved up, yet our communication structure and plan has not. This also puts a strain on our governance system, as the top organization of our governance structure was not intended to make decisions. The decision-making bodies are at the campus level. With that said, staff governance sees itself as critical to communication within the university and part of its success. We will work closely with our leaders to help them see that governance can be part of its communication plan, and will ultimately act as a two-way conduit for communication to help staff understand change and taking the concerns of staff to leadership during this time of change. One thing that has become clear for staff is that change is needed. The status quo is not meeting the current needs of our university. Status continue to take on more and more responsibility to address the many challenges that our institution is dealing with. I have heard from numerous staff who take on a temporary task that is never taken away. Many staff feel strained and eager for decisions to be made. This has been very difficult. This has made it very difficult to retain and recruit talent for our staff, but also for our governance groups. Many staff members simply do not have the time to dedicate themselves to staff governance. This limits our voice and our ability to truly govern. I strongly encourage supervisors to please include staff governance participation in your departmental values. We would love to see this cemented in something like performance evaluation process, and we need this full engagement from our organization to have a fully functional governance structure. Governance has been busy, and Staff Alliance is in support of our faculty and above our students. Staff Alliance supports what the faculty have proposed in means of change to the policy. We also believe that this is one of many possible ways of changing. I am eager to learn what potential changes that the policy audit may bring to the Board of Regents policy. Substantive change is needed. At this point, policy appears to be a good place to start. We must continue to innovate at all levels, and as the board works to clarify, staff governance will continue to innovate to meet the needs of our constituents and the university as a whole. One of the Staff Alliance priorities is to build connections with our new integrated administrative structures. This includes human resources. We have begun to take a lead role to establishing a working relationship with human resources to more aggressively address the concerns of staff. These include, but are not limited to, recognition, morale, compensation, recruitment, retention, development, and mediation. We are eager to see this relationship create positive outcomes for staff over the next couple months. We have begun to see a shift in the University of Alaska's culture toward a more empowered shared governance environment. This is new for many of us and will require us to reflect on our ideas and shared governance and learn more about how shared governance can be integrated into all aspects of the university. Our commitment to staff and leadership is that we will seek out opportunities for inclusion and be present during the decision-making process. This empowered relationship is also an opportunity for all staff and students to be more actively engaged in our governance body. We hope that when there is an issue within the system, that they will trust us to champion their causes and continue to choose the University of Alaska for their careers in education. Thank you again for your care and hard work to get the University of Alaska through this challenging time and to ensure that we continue to be a strong institution for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Regents and stakeholders. Good morning, Regents and stakeholders. Maria has lost her voice, so I am Heather Batchelder, Vice Faculty Alliance Chair, so I am filling in for Maria today. Thank you for your service to the university system, and thank you for this opportunity to share our work with you. I will speak about our Faculty Alliance retreat and highlight some examples of collaboration to enhance student success among our fabulous institutions. Faculty Alliance met on October 19th and 20th for our fall retreat. During that retreat, students, staff, faculty, and administrators shared information regarding their thoughts about the threat to the accreditations of UAS, UAA, and UAF after receiving the letter from the NWCCU. Most stakeholders were shocked after the president's memo became public, demonstrating the need for the role clarification. Shared governance has been an ongoing issue since the inception of strategic pathways. There are ways to facilitate buy-in from stakeholders. Perhaps rather than lead campuses that necessitate one winner and two losers, implementing a model in which 3 universities employ a dean who shares appointment at each university in order to have authority and works with the provosts and chancellors at each university. So students, staff, and faculty buy in and share ownership of the College of blank, which enhances each university and not just one. Mac Powell, the vice president of the NWCCU, spoke with us at the retreat and stated that if BOR policy was not changed, that would be problematic. Considering the importance of our respective accreditations, Faculty Alliance drafted a resolution requesting revision of BOR policy in order to meet the NWCCU accreditation standards. Faculty members of Faculty Alliance, along with faculty from each of the accredited institutions, met to review the policy from the BOR and suggested revisions that may provide clarity in the roles of the chancellors and the president. The resolution and the suggested revisions were discussed at the retreat, and representatives for students and staff expressed their support for the resolution. Our chancellor spoke with us at the retreat, and it was apparent that they were under the same communication constraints, as they could not share their letters or their principles they worked on together to create with us. They did say that our suggestions for revisions aligned with their principles. There is unanimous support from each of the institution's faculty senates, staff, and student governance groups, and from the that communication is the issue. As an alliance, we discussed our concerns over the fact that the need for change is not taken as seriously as it needs to be. And unfortunately, despite the fact that the BOR took one UA off the table until 2021, it appears as if the message from statewide remains one UA is the only way. We see that stakeholder input may not be valued through the new 2040 plan, the back service consolidations, presentations by leadership of statewide perpetuating one UA as the only solution, the use of budget chaos as an excuse for the lack of shared governance, and the memo. The continuing perpetuation of faculty as only acting out of anxiety or fear for job loss. The prevalence of consolidation into one university presentations during the meeting yesterday, and the responses to stakeholder input, particularly the students from statewide leadership. There is still great concern that only one voice is still being heard above all others. Our Faculty Alliance sees many examples of organic ground-up collaboration from students, staff, faculty, provosts, and chancellors, and we would like to make sure that you are aware of the many wonderful things happening throughout the UA system to meet the needs of our students. The presenters mentioned many of these activities the universities are engaging in now as a means to increase student success. And some of these examples include, although each of the university serves different populations, each university values the indigenous lands upon which they are built. We are all committed to Indigenous studies and collaborating across the system to provide appropriate place-based courses for students to meet the Alaska Native Knowledge graduation requirement that is in place and maintained at all institutions. Specific recruiting mechanisms for recruiting Alaska Native students are present within each university. For example, PETUS, Preparing Indigenous Teachers and Administrators for Alaska Schools, has been established for almost 20 years and has a strong database of success. All of the universities in our UA system have adopted or working on adopting the interstate passport system, which will ease the transfer of the first 2 years, the entire block of GERs within our 3 institutions in the state and throughout institutions that are participating in the program. I believe there's over 14 at this time. Dan Klein is taking the lead on this for us. The curriculum gurus from each university work together to align the GERs, and they continue to ensure that new courses are maintained within that system and continue to be aligned. The Common Calendar Committee's work is ongoing and has brought start times and course times into greater alignment throughout the system. The remaining dual enrollment funds will be shared and discussed collaboratively across the system as suggested by the provosts. Faculty Alliance will establish an OER exploratory team as each institution is seeking to learn more about information on this topic. These are educational resources for our students that do not cost the student anything. There are dual appointments between universities. Variation in traditional course semesters are occurring. Summer institutes, courses that transcend semesters, partnerships with Native corporations are ways that we think outside the box on the traditional semester system. Technology has been provided to fishery programs so that students can complete their work while they are seabound and are not confined to a classroom or any sort of relying on any broadband or technology for synchronous meetings. The faculty is establishing a faculty-led research committee, and there's partnerships in degree programs. For example, there's a partnership in the forestry degree program between UAF and UAS. Faculty members serving in governance have done radio interviews, TV interviews, and also spoken with print media to try to get credible information out to the public as a united unit. Informal student success teams comprised of faculty across disciplines who collaborate system-wide are enhancing student success. Student-led governance groups are creating activities that have become embedded in the university, such as the Power and Privilege Symposium that Chancellor Caulfield mentioned earlier. Faculty are collaborative and are cooperating. We understand that the need to increase revenue and make cuts. We are dedicated to our students, and each university has received compliments and commendations from accrediting bodies regarding the sincere and meaningful relationships that faculty at UAS, UAA, and UAF have created with our students. Again, thank you for your service and for your dedication to ensuring that all of our students from diverse backgrounds with varying abilities are successful in their educational endeavors at our amazing universities.
Thank you all for your reports. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Not seeing any, but thank you very much. We appreciate the range of ideas that you've presented. I appreciate it. I would like to try to get one more item out of the way before we take a short break for lunch, and that's the we want to move. I would like to move through the approval of the consent agenda, but that requires that before we do that, we had the audit committee report, but we need to have the report from the ASA committee. So, Regent Purdue.
Yes, thank you. And I'm also going to be assisted by Vice President Lair. We don't have any action items on our agenda for the consent agenda. The bulk of our meeting was spent listening to some excellent reports from the Faculty Alliance, some of which Heather covered, some of the material, and then engaging with the provosts on academic planning and what's coming ahead for us in the committee. And many of our members are actually here at the table, so they'll be able to supplement anything I'm going to say. In your packet is a graphic that just represents one part of the process for academic approval or discontinuation of programs. That this is outlined in our policies. But UAA, UAF, and UAS are all engaging in their own rigorous processes to review programs. And they will be bringing their information forward to the Academic Council, which is in our policy, which is comprised of our provost and our vice president, Paul Air. They have a process that they use to either seek consensus or make a recommendation if everyone does not agree. And then Paul has the job of putting that information together and also looking for collaborations, which the provosts have also told us they're going to be focusing on, and then bringing that information to our ASA. We are scheduling a special meeting for the ASA in April. The timeline that the provosts have agreed to is basically a mid-March, don't hold me exactly, but a mid-March timeframe for the chancellors to make their recommendations to the SAC, to the Academic Council. And so it's an action-packed process from this day forward, both at the university level and at our committee. Just final, and then I'll ask Paul once he wants to add. We are going to have a face-to-face meeting unless we see that the volume of proposals does not warrant that. So we want to schedule a face-to-face meeting of our committee, and and maybe Mr. Chair, you can talk about other members and if they want to attend. But if there is a lot of proposals for program discontinuation or downsizing or whatever they are, we definitely want to give every one of them a thorough review, and we definitely want to have enough time to do that.
Yes, thank you, Regent Perdue. Just to follow up on the program reviews that each of the three universities are conducting, each of them on their provost website have posted information about the processes that they're engaged in. All of them allow for time for feedback to your provost chancellor in their process as they go forward. The chancellor's proposals are due to us on March 23rd. So in that period of February, March, there will be time for those sorts of input. So there's time for that. But we also want to have time as they come to the board and to the committee for other input from constituents as well. And so we did ask that there be a special academic student affairs committee in April. And the question is then, because if there are programs that are being recommended for deletion or consolidation, the full board needs to act on those, is working out a timeline for those. And so I've been working with Regent Perdue on those. I also would point out that the infographic that we have on the board site is slightly different than that which was presented to Academic and Student Affairs to clarify the need and the role that the board plays in looking at program integration, coordination as part of your policies. So I think we need to, as recommendations come from the universities, look at, and there will be communication from the three universities, their provosts, about programs, program sharing, program assisting as we're looking at some of these reductions, to make sure that those things are going forward so that we can preserve programs across our state as we're moving forward. One of the other things I will add is that we did have reports from faculty on the Common Calendar and on the curricular task force, and so we are going to be following up with those going forward to see where we are with those processes and moving forward. And I appreciate the role that Megan Busby, Maria Williams, and the entire curricular team had in preparing those presentations. Also, because this is academic and student affairs, we are going to better integrate the student affairs part of that mission, and so have regular updates to the board and issues to bring to the board on the student affairs side. And so working with the vice chancellors and with Saichi Oba, the associate vice president for students, on those issues. And so again, we don't have any issues on the consent agenda for this meeting. We plan to have some programs that we're already in the program review process for you for the February meeting for your assessment. And then also I'm expecting to see more in the April meeting.
Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Academic Student Affairs Chair. One of the other things that we did cover and looked at was our enrollment numbers, both for head count and student hours, and got a summary of what those have been like over the last 10 years. And if board members are interested, those could be forwarded to you. But detailed, interesting report, and thank you, Vice President Lair, for pulling that together. It's very informative, and unfortunately, I don't like the trends I'm seeing, but it's also consistent with what Sally Johnston indicated in her presentation yesterday.
One of the things I will point out with that, and thank you very much for asking for that, Regent Parker. We do a lot of the data from UA and Review, from some of the published data, and also from our ongoing reports. And our maximum year for enrollment was, I think, 2012. Is that correct, President Johnson? I think it was something like that. 2011. And during that time, we've had tuition increases and no tuition increases, but it's been a pretty steady decline in enrollment. It's a national trend, as you point. It's a demographics of Alaska trend, and it's something that I think warrants a further discussion to see how we reach those, to reverse those trends and slow those, so at least slow them down as we move forward. But I appreciate the committee wanting to take a look at those numbers.
I think
Hughes?
Regent Hargraves wanted to speak before me.
Or did you have a question?
Well, these enrollment trends over the past, was it 10 years, speaks of a steady decline. Some of the impressions that's going around, I think the state now, is that all of a sudden we're having declines because of present problems. Mm-hmm. I think that message needs to be made clear that this is not just something that started overnight in the past 6 months. The university has been experiencing it now for 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. However, I would say that the upheavals that we have had in the last 9 months or so have had an impact. To say that this is just the normal expected decline is kind of whitewashing that part of the system. I think we do need to consider the messaging that we've had. We've heard some great things at all of our universities, and there are reasons why students should come to the University of Alaska. But clearly, the messaging that has come from the governor on down has had an impact on our students. The Alaska Performance Scholarship upheavals, the WWAMI upheavals have had an impact. And so we have to, I don't want to even imply that this steady decline is normal for us. I think there is opportunity in the state. We have a lot of ability to grow. We're not at the national averages in terms of college going rate. We're not at the national averages in terms of retention. We're not at the national averages in our students with some college and no degree. So even though nationally you could say there are declines, I think there are things that we have to do in the state that can help to improve that. So I do think that the current news has had an impact, no doubt about it. But I also think that there are some opportunities. And that's where, as Chancellor White indicated, their investment into student recruitment and retention has been very important. The same is true at UAA and UAS in terms of putting more attention towards keeping the students we have and getting the students we have. Those middle college things have had a positive impact at UAA, especially with our partnerships at MATSU and ASD. So I think there's a lot that we're doing, and working with the three universities to try to stem some of that and to try to get us back to where we need to be as a state with our college going rate and population.
Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For some reason, I thought I'd seen that decline, and maybe it was just because I get the national stuff, but if we haven't gotten it, I think every region needs it because pretty darn important. It's a revenue item as well as a lack of Alaskans we're teaching. So I have a question, Madam Chair, with respect to the areas that the board had wanted to review from a 3-university system. How many of those are now being reviewed by the universities?
So each university has done some different things. At UAA, they're actually doing a special program review on all of their programs, all academic programs in all areas. UAF is doing review on roughly half of their programs across for various programs that look like they're maybe at risk or are not as high enrollment. And UAS is doing their review on selected programs. So it is not every area that was covered in the expedited review process that we had constructed, but in most areas there will be examination going across the system.
So how is it that we're in the first year of the compact?
Yep.
And we're preparing for the second year. And during the first year, the regents wanted to have some information to assist in all this. And of course, we didn't get it. So now in the second year, we're looking at it coming to the committee in April.
Right.
And will it come to the board in April?
Well, that is a decision for the board as to when the board would want to look at these programs. Your next scheduled meeting is in June.
In June?
That's the next meeting after the April deadline.
I was thinking we had some time off.
No.
I didn't know about that.
No, so that is a question. If there are recommendations for program discontinuation, there are teach out obligations, there are faculty notice obligations that we have. And so making those decisions, even if we made a decision in January or February, if that were possible, we would not recoup those savings for perhaps another year. So the campuses, the universities know that they have to make reductions in other areas as well. And so it's going to be a challenge going forward to meet the budget if the compact budget holds.
Well, I understand. I mean, and hopefully, maybe it won't hold and all of a sudden the governor has a different idea about things. But I'm very, very concerned because the clock is ticking and now we're going to have a circumstance that in effect, we're lucky if we get this by April. And already then, this year we have in effect provided the cuts across the campuses, and we still haven't fulfilled our fiduciary duty of looking at how we're going to educate Alaska, the same thing that David was talking about yesterday. And so I really feel like we're in jeopardy. And so I want to know what suggestions everybody has for us doing that, because we have big breaks. I know everybody thinks they meet all the time, but, and we do work all the time, but we have big breaks. And so after this, should we not have another special meeting? We have a January meeting for one day, and then we go in to the end of February.
That's correct.
And so we could be working during this time on things that, I'm very, very concerned because we talked about our fiduciary duty. Karen did so well yesterday. And there are some people in the public that are saying, what are you doing? Well, Joe Heckman said that. She's waiting. And also while she waits, we don't have any information, zero. And so I think we need information. Sure. And I think we need it as quickly as possible because every moment that goes on, we're depriving students from circumstance that allows us to be able to better assign dollars. Because we've done this for years, this whole give every campus a cut, and then in the past, not now, but the chancellors to just go through and cut every department or, whatever. And there's no circumstance of really thinking about this, and it's our job, but we don't have the tools to do it.
I know that we will have a budget discussion this afternoon.
I understand
with regard to that as well. So.
I understand that, but in order to do our job, we need facts. and information. And so I'd like to go away from this meeting with some indication of how that's going to happen, because I'm really very
The campus level program reviews that are going on on an expedited basis and as quickly as we can. And they've been working with the chair of the ASA to try to get that information with all deliberate speed. And so there will be, I believe, a significant meeting of the committee. And it would be my recommendation as chair emeritus that all of the regents be invited and approved for travel to that meeting, so that we can, as quickly as possible, come up to speed on where we are at the point at which there is the maximum information available.
And there's 4 months between now and that meeting.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we've been not doing our job for this time. So I guess that doesn't comfort me. I'm wondering how we are going to, in effect, perform our fiduciary duty. Because by the time we get there, we've already then, in effect, determined that we won't have any say in the 21-22 budget. Yes,
Mr. Chair. So we had this discussion at the ASA committee, and we had presentations from the provosts and the chancellors on what they are doing and the process that they are undertaking now so that we can make informed decisions moving forward. Would it be worthwhile for either the provost or the chancellors to discuss the process that they're using on this expedited program review for each of their campuses?
I understand that. We've done that before, but I'm talking about time and our duty, our fiduciary duty.
And I think to follow up on what Regent Parker just said, Regent Hughes, the processes, I understand the need for urgency, but I also understand the need for input to the process and input from the constituents involved, the faculty, the students in the process. And that's what their processes have been designed to ensure, as rather than, and being able to have the data necessary to allow you to make those decisions. And so it would be nice to have that now, but obviously it takes some time. And so that's really why these processes, and the processes were submitted by the campuses, approved by the president as per regulation to allow them to move forward.
President Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think to Regent Hughes' question, it is our intent to share with you on January 17th at that Regents meeting our preliminary plan for the 21 budget and how the reductions would be taken. They are not specific because, of course, we'll need to go through these processes that the universities are now leading for the specifics. But I've asked the chancellors to begin working with their teams on the budget side of these things. And that presentation will be coming to you in January. So we'll have a bit of a parallel process here looking at the budget side, how much can come out of this area, that area, or the other area. And then within those areas, academics particularly, that's what would be subject to their reviews and would be coming to the academic committee and then, of course, to the board a bit later in the spring.
I don't understand why we are not in the areas that are not being looked at. In other words, UAA is doing all the things, and they're saying they were going to review everything. And then I assume in that look, they're going to look at what collaboration there is with the other universities. Well, that's kind of tough to do if UAF is only doing part of it. And that's what my concern is. So then all of a sudden, and I appreciate all this time and so forth, but we get to a circumstance that the regions have, in effect, will have no input in either the cut we took last year or the cut we take this year. Zero, because we have zero material. And we've been asking for material, but we don't have it. So I am very, very upset about this because I just feel like people ask me, okay, have you seen the material? No. I mean, we saw, I think in the packet, there were things, did we get what was occurring? We did get that.
Yes,
Yes.
and also at the September board meeting,
Yes.
Each of the universities presented how they were planning to take the FY20 reductions.
I understand, but we didn't look down and say, okay, we want to do it some other way. That's my whole point. I mean, we're responsible for this. And, it's kind of like, I'm not saying the chancellors are going to make errors or not, but like on athletics, that's another area that the regents are responsible for. And it's our decision. I mean, it's frustrating because I don't feel like the regents are making any decisions. I mean, we made decisions and then some of them were were taken back. But I mean, I might as, we don't need to be here because, I mean, if we don't get any materials, I want to know how many students are in the class. I want to know what's the most favorite, activity. I mean, all this stuff, I don't get it. And I can tell you at private universities, we get it.
And all of that information is being considered by the chancellors in their academic program reviews pursuant to board policy and university regulation, which specifies the criteria that they will be following. And the committee went through those criteria and discussed those at its recent
We'll
meeting.
get all that material?
Yes, it will all be available to you.
And so then at that time, but only on certain programs from some of the universities, but UAA will have all that material.
That's correct.
And I expect it's quite a bit of material.
It's going to be a...
And I told Karen, I said, but see, do you understand? I mean,
Mhm.
I don't want to prolong this, but people that I deal with feel that we're in a crisis and we need to move forward and we need to understand, we can't make any decisions when we haven't seen one thing. And so I think that we should plan on weeks of meetings in April and May, because I mean, it's just, we can't make decisions when we don't have material and then nobody gives us material. That's my deal.
Regent Perdue.
I have some understanding, sympathy for what Mary is saying, and I think the problem is the time frames. So we're in 20, FY20, right? Help me with this, Michelle. Are we in 20? We're 20. We're in 20. 20 is cooking along. It's November. And I would say, of course, that there hasn't been expedited program review at the campus level, so there isn't any results from that until February. So one question for regents is, the chancellors are handling these cuts to some extent, from their targets that they were provided, and I'm sure they're doing them, but I don't think we understand what they are. And I think that is one of Mary's points, was we are out in the public all the time, and we don't understand, what's actually happening. Now, perhaps we're not there, and maybe January would be the time when we would be there, but some briefing on 20 and what's going on in 20 is probably very essential for us.
I think we can certainly provide an update. We provided a presentation to the board in September on the plans at each one of the universities for FY20.
Right.
We can certainly provide an update.
Those will be further refined now that
we'll know more.
Yes,
about how those were actually taken in 20, and then also in light, and then how generally are we looking at budget allocation for 21?
Yes.
Again, it wouldn't be the specifics of this academic program or that at that point in time. That only can follow, based on the board's direction, only can follow the expedited program reviews that the universities are leading. Right. And I want to say that as an ASA chair, and we haven't given the opportunity for our universities to speak, but it's hard work. What they're doing is very, very hard work, this program reviews, and the work that they're doing with their faculty and students and stakeholders is critical for our success. And my role, I believe, and Paul's role is to support them in getting this done, because it's going to be very hard. I think there is a desire for vertical cuts, and I think that is coming not only from the public, but many of the people that I talk to that work in our
work in our university are just really struggling with across the board cutting. And so, but it's hard. It's very, very hard. So 21, that is a good question as to whether even any of these cuts can occur in 21, given the actions that the board made. And I made that motion and I understand it. But we do have to get our best thinking from our chancellors about 21, given the time frame that we're at and the governance process that we're covering. And so then we're out 3 years. And so I think that's Mary's point. That's where we are at this point. And I think a strategic discussion on that in January is really important.
Regent Davey, I will just point out and remind the board that I can think of no program at this university that does not have dedicated faculty, does not have students who are committed to that program, that does not have alumni who have benefited from that program. And so when we bring programs to you, we are going to ask you to make some very difficult decisions about the program and the role that that program might have at the University of Alaska. So we will try to provide you with sufficient data, sufficient information to allow you to make that decision. But these are going to be very difficult decisions because we are in an unprecedented time with regard to needing to look at those programs. So please be aware of that. Please ask questions if you do not feel you have enough information, and we can get that from the universities. And I think that that's going to be a challenge for us going forward. So just be vigilant on that, be asking those questions and get the data that you need to make those decisions is going to be very critical.
One example, Paul, is, and Maria brought it up in the report, is that all 3 universities have some type of Alaska Native Indigenous studies. Mm-hmm. And is that area, as we wanted, being looked at?
I believe so.
By all universities? And it coordinated?
UAA.
Coordinated?
Yeah, and UAF is as well. At UAS, no. I think we're looking at those at UAS, but I know that UAA and UAF are. And so that is an area of looking. And those are generally lower enrollment programs, but they are very mission critical to our institution.
Exactly.
So
very important.
And when we look at those criteria that are in the regulation, and I encourage you to take a look at those again, mission, enrollment, quality, cost, all of those are responsiveness to our communities. All of those are critical in evaluation. So it's not just a cost. It's not just a mission. There's all of the factors have to be considered and weighed when we make those decisions, when you make those decisions.
I think most of this discussion has had to do with programs, evaluations, and cuts. How does the university make cuts of positions? For example, if you've got 3 night watchmen and you decide you could get by, or who decides that we could actually get by with just 2? That's not a decision of this Board of Regents, is it?
No.
But I would also add that at each of the universities, they have committed to doing administrative reviews as well, and looking at the concepts of some shared services, working with us as statewide as well in some of those areas. And so academics is not singled out. It is something they are looking across their universities from administrative sides, of support side, how we can provide those services in a reduced budget environment. It's a challenge, but it is something that they are looking at across the different areas. So it's not just an academic, although academic review is a more specified process, and as a board, you have responsibility for academic programs, for some academic programs, but other areas are being looked at as well.
If a department has 3 vices, who decides that maybe they could just have 2?
Let me just say, I realize that we're looking at the clock, but it might be time to ask the chancellors to answer some of these questions for us.
Sure. Yeah,
they do decide. this point.
It is the chancellor's decisions, and I think, Dan, you want to start?
Go ahead.
I put out a weekly column on the budget and the different actions that are happening on the budget, and I'll be happy to share that link so that, and in fact, this week's budget column was about the difference between vertical and horizontal cuts. FY20 is really a complicated year because, of course, we didn't get the budget until quite late. For me, we have hired smart people, and I rely on our people to look in their divisions and at the responsibilities and whether they need 2 people on the police force or 3 people on the police force. Those are decisions that are being made by the supervisor of the police. Those people come to are part of my leadership team, and we have these conversations. We also have these conversations about budget and cuts in public, and we will have November 21st a budget forum where we will be taking input and taking ideas about FY20. And I said it's complicated because we would have already been way along at this time, but obviously you all are familiar with the budget and how it's evolved this year. But so for this year, of course, we are doing a lot of things to try to patch this year together, and so we can move in our longer term planning to next year. One-time funding, there's a number of, I didn't go through, but I've got a whole series of building changes that we're doing, just partly demolitions, partly sales, partly leases to generate revenue to preserve programs. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of actions that are vertical actions as well as horizontal actions, but we trust the leaders that we have in these divisions to have the personnel and know where the right personnel are to go in the division if they don't need them. Everybody is under the same budget pressure, and so those positions are eliminated. There are areas that we give specific targets to and say we need 10% budget reduction in this area, and you as the leader of that area need to sort out where those positions or where the savings from contracts need to come from. In the end, those decisions, not the decisions, but that all budget responsibility rolls up to me and then rolls up to the president. But every single week, bar 1 or 2, we have a weekly column about the budget. We have a budget planning and budget committee, which is made up of faculty and administrators, and that looks at the budget over the course of the year. So thank you.
So a lot of that is similar at UAA, so I won't repeat. The overriding principle is always staying focused on what is our mission and how do we serve students. That's like what we keep front and center as we're making all decisions. We always try to take the cuts from administration first before we touch student services or academic programs. And of the $12.4 million cut, $4 million of that this year and this fiscal year is coming from academic programs. And in large part, different departments and different colleges and schools are doing it different ways, but we do have a lot of open positions, people who have left and we haven't filled those positions. So that also goes into our savings. So going forward in this year, we are starting with a 5-year look back of all our administrative cuts at UAA so that we can share that openly with the community. That has not been done, and we will be forming a group or a process for the community to have input into administrative cuts, in addition to these expedited program reviews that we're doing that we've already discussed. So that's some of the input that bubbles up, and again, it comes up through the various functions, the various departments, the various colleges. They're closer to the provision of services. They're in a better position to recommend cuts. But it is a conversation. It's not like we just rubber stamp and take everything that comes to us. It is a conversation, and we work together to come up with the best solution possible while fulfilling our mission to our students and our community.
Caulfield?
At UAS, there are certainly some similarities with what you've heard from UAF and UAA. We have our strategic Strategic Planning and Budget Advisory Committee, which is made up of representatives from our governance groups, as well as our deans and directors, campus directors included. So that is the venue where we bring ideas forward and assess how, as Kathy said, how central some of the ideas are to our mission, and looking at data about all of our various programs. So we have that in place. Our budget's in place for FY20. And of course, we're actively involved right now in looking at our FY21 budget. We have asked our deans and directors to go out and look, to go through an exercise and help identify their priorities at the unit level. And then that information is coming back to our executive cabinet, and it will go then to the Strategic Planning and Budget Advisory Committee. One thing I want to emphasize is this is not a new phenomenon we're doing. We've been going through this process of budget cuts for some years now. So we have a lot of data, and we continue to gather our data through our institutional effectiveness office, and that's been critical to the analysis. Last year, we were asked to go through, as you know, in light of the governor's proposal, very significant cuts, exercises looking at how we would accommodate those cuts. So we have a fair amount of information and ideas already on the table from that earlier exercise, which thankfully we didn't have to implement to the extreme that had been proposed, but we have that information available to us. We have the insights from deans and directors. And so as we look ahead to FY21, we are calling on our deans and directors to provide priorities for us. And that comes to our executive cabinet. It will come to our Strategic Planning and Budget Advisory Committee. And ultimately, in my role as chancellor, I have to make some of those decisions in concert with our leadership team. So happy to answer any further questions you might have.
Thank you. I think I appreciate this is a really important topic. Is Regent Anderson?
Yes, just one quick comment. I share Regent Hughes' concern about timing. The cuts that have been made to cover this first year of the compact, there's a dearth of information about what was cut, how they went about meeting those needs for cuts within each one of the campuses. We've been told that the chancellors stepped up to the plate and made those cuts. But we don't know what the cuts were, and so I just feel like we are getting put into a corner. Once those easy cuts, well, I shouldn't call them easy. One of those initial cuts that were made, now as Paul has said, we have some really hard decisions to make, but we don't know how the chancellor met the first whack. So we cannot sit on any of this stuff. And as you know, I'm frustrated with how slow things work on a campus level, but I've learned to cool my jets on that a bit. But we cannot sit by and waste 1 minute of time here if we're going to be realizing cuts for this compact. Thanks.
Chancellor White.
I just wanted to make sure that, this fiscal year 20, there's a overall budget strategy. There is not a way to practically cut $25 million from base in the middle of the year, because academic programs require time. If there's an academic program that's going to be eliminated, that requires, that is a year or 2 years, depending on teach out. Even reductions to contracts, because contracts have notice periods and people have notice periods. And so this year's fiscal strategy is a combination of cuts and one-time savings and building sales and things that will patch together this year. So I think I just want to make sure, in those comments that we're not going to roll out and demonstrate how retroactively a whole bunch of cuts were made. This is a strategy this year. And in my budget column 2 weeks ago, we talked about this strategy of for fiscal year 21, we will have some relic FY20 issues that we'll be resolving because you just can't, there are time constraints associated with contracts and people and activities. Thank you.
Purdue.
And maybe to summarize the ASA committee.
Thank you.
We do have a report that is due on some December date that is that this conversation is relevant to. And so we are going to have to, of course, the president's going to have to, with the chancellors, draft that report and indicate how we are meeting some of the targets. And so we will have that narrative, and perhaps that narrative is something is on the agenda to discuss later, but that is maybe an avenue for the board to understand where we are, depending on how much detail you're planning on going into, President Johnson. So, but that does conclude our report of the ASA at this time.
Thank you very much. Could we go on to the Facilities and Land Management Committee in Region Tuber? Can you give us a summary of that meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to defer to Michelle Rizek there with you so that she can provide an expedited summary of the action, or I should say the presentations and information provided to the committee. I believe she has a guest that intends to provide an update on our land grant as well. Michelle, would you go ahead?
Just 1 second. What?
I've been asked by General Counsel to declare a potential conflict. I don't really know if there's a conflict in relation to my husband's business that he used to own, Bettesworth North, but I am going to leave the room during this report and any voting.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay. For the sake,
Michelle, go ahead, please.
Sure. And for the sake of time, I will go through this very quickly and then address any questions that the committee member or the board members may have. We did not have any action items as part of the agenda this month. We started with an IT update, and Chief Information Technology Officer Mark Kondrak gave an update on IT, including opportunities for providing a seamless student experience. And so obviously all of these things are in the board packet if any board members would like to read more about these. We provided the UA Land Management FY19 annual report. There's a lot of good data in there, so I would encourage board members at your leisure to take a look at that. It recaps where we were for sales in FY19 and expenses and the division of our land between education property and investment property. The next item I'll move on to is the land grant initiative update. We have Mr. Fogels online, who we hired to work with us on this initiative, and we've asked him, I know this has been interest to the full board, and so I've asked Mr. Fogels if he could give an update to the board on this. And I would like to just point out one thing before I hand it over to Mr. Fogels. I think it was you, Regent Hargraves, you had asked about what involvement that the governor has had in this effort. As we'll talk about later in the day as part of the compact, the governor did agree to help remedy the land grant deficit, and you'll see within the packet in September, the governor sent in a letter to the Alaska Congressional Delegation committing that his administration will dedicate time and resources towards this solution. And so that is in the packet for the board to review. So I will pass it over to Mr. Fogels. Ed, are you online, and could you provide a brief update to the board?
Yes, Michelle, Chair Davies, Regents, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Hey, well, thank you for this opportunity to present to you. Again, my name is Ed Fogels. I've been retained by the university to assist in obtaining the remainder of your unfulfilled land grant entitlement. By way of background, I recently finished a 30-year career at the Alaska Department of Natural Resources and was most recently in the position of Deputy Commissioner. For most of my career at the department, I was involved in land management issues and very familiar with Alaska's land situation. My task is to identify approximately 360,000 acres of land that could potentially be transferred to the university from the federal government. For some brief background, at statehood, the state of Alaska was granted about 105 million acres of federal land. To date, Alaska has received about 100 million acres of this land and is still owed about 5 million acres. We would like to ask the federal government to transfer about 360,000 acres of this 5 million acres directly to the University of Alaska. This land would then be managed by your land management office and could greatly improve the long-term budget security of the university. In choosing these 360,000 acres, we are restricted to looking at a very specific pool of federal land. We must choose from only lands that the state has filed selections on. The Alaska Statehood Act required the state to file its selections many years ago, and these selections cannot be substantially altered. I am working closely with your land management staff to accomplish this. We have received the complete GIS database of the lands that the state has filed selections on, and we are currently researching that database to find lands that would be suitable for the university's acquisition. We are looking for lands that have long-term revenue generation potential. The state GIS database contains information on the resource potential of the selected lands, whether there's oil and gas, mineral, timber potential, for example. We're also looking at real estate potential and other resources. Once we have identified our first cut at a suitable pool of lands, we will present it to the university leadership. At this time, the university will be able to decide how it would like this land portfolio to look and what types of land would best suit the university's land management objectives and policies. Our next step would be to work with the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, which we've already started, and the governor to agree on which lands would then be transferred to the university. The success of this effort will depend on a unified agreement between the university and the state of Alaska before submitting this list of desired lands to the federal government. We also have some legal work to do with the U.S. Department of Interior to ensure a smooth mechanism for this transfer. We hope to have a preliminary list of lands for the university to consider by the end of this calendar year. This is a complex endeavor, and I've given you a very high-level update. I must also let you know that I'm very impressed with the professionalism of your land management office staff. They are truly assets to the university. I would be happy to answer any questions for the regents at this time. Thank you very much.
Hargreaves.
So can we feel optimistic that this thing's about to fall into place? Say in the next 10 years.
Oh,
Is it going to be another 100 years, or can we expect it in 10 years?
Well, I believe that it is very possible to get this entire process taken care of relatively quickly. There are several different types of categories of land that we are looking at, some of which could be transferred to the university relatively quickly, given that there is solid agreement between the university and the state of Alaska, the governor's office staff, that these lands are appropriate to the university. Once that agreement is reached between the state and the university, then some of these lands could be transferred relatively quickly, perhaps in a matter of months. Other lands in this pool may be more difficult to transfer, but those may be of such potentially high value that the university is willing to wait for several years for these lands to be transferred. There will be some kind of risk revenue potential generation analysis that would have to be taken care of. But the full 360,000 acres probably would not come at one time. It would come in phases, and I believe that the first initial phases could happen relatively quickly, again, given agreement between the state of Alaska and the university.
I'd just like to mention for Regent Beretta and Regent Hughes had called into the meeting and they were interested how Regents will be involved in this process. And so we are working on if there's going to be, a short work session, if it'll be at a future committee meeting, if it'll be at the January meeting, but at some point to get additional board feedback in this process.
Thank you. Were there any other items that you wanted to cover?
There was, if I may. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
We also have Associate Vice Chancellor Kim Mahoney there on the screen back there, and she had provided an update to the committee on the UAA Energy Savings Performance Contract, and Chair Tuber had asked that she would come and provide a brief update on where UAA is on that too for the full committee here, or for the full board. So she's behind you. If you could please, Kim.
Hello, Regents. This is Kim Mahoney. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Davies. So this is a brief report, as Michelle alluded to, regarding our process in energy savings performance contracting. And in its simplest form, it's a way to fund infrastructure improvements utilizing energy savings to finance debt in the form of an improvement. And at UAA, we are using the energy savings performance contract to develop scopes of work in 5 of our oldest buildings that we have increasing concern about infrastructure reliability. And because much of our critical deferred maintenance continues to be underfunded or unfunded, we are at a point of emergent concerns about system failures and subsequent building closures, similar to the 2-week closure of our admin and humanities building just this fall because of an electrical fire in our main electrical distribution panel for that building. So these closures are not planned, not timely, and they're very costly. So in seeking alternate funding options, we are exploring and using energy savings performance contracting. And we have awarded the agreement to a preliminary contract agreement to Siemens. And their first scope of work will be to perform investment grade audits on 5 of our buildings that we have identified, which then will define the specific scope of work that we can accomplish using this contracting methodology. We will then develop the financing agreement, which will fund the subsequent design and construction project work. And the approval point for the Board of Regents on this effort would be next year once the proposed project scope is developed and the finance agreement is drafted. And I'm open to any questions that you might have. This is an innovative procurement, and this is the first one that the university has explored in terms of the financing arrangement. We have accomplished similar energy improvement projects, but we have funded those improvements and benefited from those energy savings. This is the first one that we would be engaged in through a lending agreement. But it's not new to the state of Alaska. They've been doing these for several years. Are there any questions?
No, I think, thank you for that. And I appreciate I understand that the state's been doing that, and I appreciate the innovation and the way you're applying them. But I think it's a good approach, and we'll look forward to the report coming to the board when they're prepared.
Okay, thank you, Regent Davies.
And I think it's a great example of, what UAA is doing to look at reducing costs longer term, as we talked about in the budget discussion earlier today. So I was going to talk about monetization of university resources, where we're at, our assets, but since that's part of the compact agreement, I think we can talk about that later for the sake of time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Michelle at this point on the facilities and land management report? If not, then let's move on to the consent agenda. There are 2 items on the consent agenda, and There are two motions that are covered by that. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move.
Moved and seconded. Randy, can you call the roll on it?
Regent Banya? Regent Garrett? Regent Hughes? Regent Hargraves? Regent Anderson?
Yes.
Regent Tuber? Regent Tuber?
Yes.
Regent Parker? Regent Purdue? Regent O'Neill?
Yes.
Regent Davies?
Yes.
9 in favor, none opposed.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we're going to have to take our break for lunch now. And it's a little past half past. So maybe we can try to be back here about 5 minutes of, so that we can get back on our agenda.
Richard.
Yeah. I'm okay with that. Are you?
Drop off. This is Dale Anderson. I'm going to have to drop off.
Okay, Dale. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.